The third episode of RWBY Volume 9 Beyond is here, and I'll be honest, this one felt like it would be better named as RWBY Volume 10 Beyond, because it 100% takes place after the finale of Volume 9, and at least one of the events in this episode is probably going to be directly in Volume 10, if not even a later volume. But we'll get there when we get there. If you want to check out the episode yourself, make sure to go to the Rooster Teeth website and watch it there while it's still active. Use the top link in the description below and support this series that we all love. Now, for this episode, we are headed back to the Ever After, and our young hero is that of Somewhat. Little, who we followed throughout the course of Volume 9, ascended by the end of it and returned as Somewhat, with no memories of their past life, the same as other Afterans when they ascend. And so for this journey we follow Somewhat and their trusty steed Juniper on their new adventures in the Ever After as they try to fulfill their purpose. And right at the beginning of the episode, as RWBY is narrating, we find out exactly what Somewhat's purpose is. And it's somewhat vague, to say the very least. They are tasked with finding out what's wrong in the Ever After and doing what they feel is right to fix it. Very vague. Find what's wrong, do what's right. Makes perfect sense. And as long as Somewhat is able to keep their moral compass, then that type of purpose will work out very well. They are filling the role in the Ever After that might have actually been left by the Curious Cat. That could have been the purpose that the Curious Cat had at one point in time, before the cat felt betrayed by Alex not bringing them to Remnant, which then caused the cat's outlook on things to change, and they became much more self-centered rather than, trying to help the Afterans and help better the Ever After as a whole. But now Somewhat is on the case, and Somewhat's doing, well, the best that they can. And over the course of this episode, we see a number of the characters that we had encountered throughout Volume 9 in the Ever After. At first, Somewhat stops by the Genial Gems to see if there's anything wrong there, anything that they could do to help. But the Genial Gems aren't really paying attention to Somewhat. Instead, they are much more focused on themselves. And the story goes that they once had a hero, someone who would do everything for them, and so they really didn't take any time to focus on themselves. Because the hero pretty much met all of their needs, kept them protected, and did everything. And now that they've ascended, they're a lot more focused on doing things themselves, helping themselves. They still want to help others, but it seems the philosophy that they follow now, which was said within the episode, is that the more that they help themselves now, the more that they'll be able to help others later. The only issue I see with that logic is, and especially considering what we saw with the Paper Pleasers in Volume 9, and how, to put it bluntly, they didn't follow the exact best logic when going about things, so I don't really have faith that the Genial Gems will be able to figure out what point in time it is where it would switch from, okay, we've helped ourselves enough, to let's start helping others more. I have a feeling they're just going to continue focusing on themselves and have the best of intentions, because it's the Genial Gems. I don't think there's a mean-spirited bone or crystal in their body, but I don't think this is the final form of the Genial Gems. I think they would probably go through Ascension one more time, figure out a balance between helping others and helping themselves. That being said, though, one of the Genial Gems who was taking a break, something that is very important when working hard, make sure to rest and take care of yourself, again, focusing on themselves, but during that break they did offer help to Somewhat. Unfortunately, though, there wasn't really any help that they could offer. They talked with Somewhat, but said that there was nothing ordinary or out of the ordinary that was happening around their acre. And so Somewhat journeys to other acres, seeking out what might be wrong in those places. They first travel to the Garden Market, where the Curious Cat had taken Team RWBY before, and where the market ended up being destroyed, or largely so, by multiple Jabberwockers attacking the place in search of Team RWBY. But it seems to be bouncing back. They say that something bad did happen, but they are recovering. And we do see two characters at the Garden Market. One was the bird that was handing out cookies, and the other was the bird that the Curious Cat had kind of mind-controlled into attacking the Jabberwockers to help buy themselves and Team RWBY time to get the heck out of there without being devoured by the Jabberwocker. And speaking of being devoured by the Jabberwocker, isn't that supposed to remove you from the cycle of ascension? When the Jabberwocker eats you, you do not go to the tree? Wasn't that directly stated in Volume 9? How is that bird alive? We may not have seen it directly on screen, but that bird was sent into direct combat against the Jabberwocker, and as RWBY was running away, she looked back, and we could hear the bird's screams as presumably the Jabberwocker had a hold of it and devoured it. So therefore they should be removed from the cycle of ascension, and yet the bird is still there. I don't think we'll ever get an answer to the question on how the bird lived, unless the bird just got away, but then what were those screams? You'd think there'd be some injury, because I don't know. The rules that the Ever After operate by are still largely unknown to us, so there's probably some explanation as to why the bird survived. It's probably just as simple as it got away, but again, there's still some questions. Somewhat then continues their search for things that are wrong in the Ever After, which leads them to Herb, the herbalist. And Herb asks Somewhat if he can help Somewhat with anything. And Somewhat says, no, I still have my purpose, I don't need to go to the tree yet. Even though Somewhat is brand new to this world, relatively speaking, Somewhat still knows what Herb's purpose is, which makes me think that Somewhat at least has some knowledge just ingrained in them about what certain characters' purposes are within the Ever After. Herb in particular, I'm guessing a lot of Afterans know will send them to the tree, which then also makes me question why the cat intentionally brought Team RWBY to the herbalist. I just find it curious that Somewhat knew that Herb, well, his purpose was to send people to the tree. So it seems to be something that's in opposition of things we already knew about the Ever After, that people's memories are largely wiped, they don't recognize anyone that they've seen before, and they wouldn't know what other people's purpose are, which is demonstrated next by the next person that Somewhat goes to meet. Herb actually tells Somewhat that there is an Afteran in need of help, and sends Somewhat over to the Crimson Keep, where Somewhat notices that something feels wrong here. As Somewhat enters the Crimson Keep, there is no one around. The guards that would be protecting the Red Prince, or at least obeying the Red Prince's orders, being beheaded at his bequest, well, they aren't present. In fact, no one is except the Red Prince himself. His face still cracked from his encounter with Team RWBY, he seems to be almost a shell of his former self. At least he's not acting as bratty as he did before, but it seems that the encounter with Team RWBY had so much of an impact on him, and he seems to have gained some matter of self-reflection, that he sent everyone else away because the prince can't expect any of his followers to be ruled by someone like him. Which Somewhat asks him, what is someone like you? And the Red Prince then makes eye contact with Somewhat, and there's a sign of recognition between them, as if they've met each other before. And Somewhat thinks, as I'm sure Somewhat would think of most people being the ever-positive mouse that they are, maybe we were friends at one point. And the Red Prince thinks maybe that could be the case, and so invites Somewhat to play a game. But Somewhat has a purpose, and so does the Red Prince. And the Red Prince even offers to help Somewhat with their purpose if Somewhat plays that game with them and wins. And so they play their game. Somewhat directly asks the Red Prince what is his purpose, to which the prince responds, to win this game. And that brings me back to my previous point. Somewhat did not know the Red Prince's purpose, but did know the herbalist's purpose. Maybe it's something with the herbalist in general, that the Afterans, when they go through Ascension, know where to go to get back to the tree. I just find it curious that Somewhat knew what Herb's purpose was, but didn't know what the Red Prince's was. Anyways, in response to the Red Prince saying that their purpose was to win this game, Somewhat responds inquisitively, well, what if my purpose was also to win this game? And the Red Prince says that's just the life that they live. And Somewhat contradicts that, saying, well, what if it doesn't have to be that way? They've met plenty of Afterans who have changed even without going to the tree. They have found new ways to go about life. Not necessarily a directly new purpose, but have started doing new things, learning new things, and starting to live more of their life, essentially. and even somewhat offers the Red Prince, maybe you could start teaching others to win. Regardless, then somewhat actually beats the Red Prince at their game. It seemed as though they were playing a much more normal version of chess in the Ever After, still on the same hexagonal style of game board that was used during the game between RWBY and the Red Prince, though with very different rules because, as far as we know, the pieces weren't coming to life and there weren't life or death stakes for RWBY's friends, in this case, Somewhat's friends. I don't think Juniper was transported onto the board or anything like that. The Red Prince has certainly changed, but the game of chess was different rules than in our world for sure. Still, Somewhat wins without really seeming to understand how, and because of Somewhat's words, the Red Prince seemed deeply moved by them. And quite possibly the prince will continue to change and grow from the brat that he once was into something potentially greater. Thanks to Somewhat's actions, there is certainly one less thing wrong in the Ever After. And with a job well done, Somewhat went off to what looks like the Jabberwocker's acre, or rather, the acre where Neo landed and encountered the Jabberwocker, the dark purple area, at the very least, and went there seemingly for rest after a good day's work, but encountered something that they were somewhat unprepared for. We see a portal open up, in the exact same color, style, and shape of the portals that were used to get people from Atlas into the Crossroads and then into Vacuo. And Somewhat then says, "Oh, you're back." And this is where the episode ends off, which is one hell of a cliffhanger to leave off on, because there is a total of 5 people that Somewhat would recognize coming from Remnant to the Ever After. Given that the portal is the same as the ones who took people from Atlas to Vacuo, it has to have been created by the Staff of Creation. How exactly they were able to explain to Ambrosius to create a portal between 2 different worlds? Maybe just using the vault as an example again was enough to do that. Maybe Team RWBY took a picture on their phone at some point, but they had never actually been to this acre before, so how they were able to open it up at that location, unless they specifically asked Ambrosius to open up a portal wherever Somewhat is, questions are going to have to be answered, because out of the 5 people that Somewhat would recognize, it's literally just Team RWBY and Jean. Those are the only people Somewhat has ever encountered from Remnant, disregarding their experiences as Little because they do not remember those experiences. Little would not remember Neo, and likely was never alive at the point in time when Alex and Lewis were present in the Ever After. Even if they were present at the time that Alex and Lewis were there, after Ascension, Little would not remember them anyways. So it is either Team RWBY or Jean that came through the portal. Obviously, my guess would be RWBY, since RWBY has such a deep connection due to their time spent with Little, and was extremely happy to see that Little had ascended to Somewhat. So of course, RWBY would go back for them, quite possibly as backup for the fight yet to come with Salem. But now that we know that there is going to be a way back to the Ever After, and that someone is certainly going to go back to the Ever After, that opens up a new avenue for possibly sending Salem back to the tree for Ascension, or possibly the gods back to the tree for Ascension, or something of that nature. It does bring up the question whether the Staff of Creation was intended to be able to send people to different worlds. Maybe that's an oversight of the God of Light and the power that they gave the staff, but yeah, heck of a cliffhanger to leave off on, because that means Team RWBY is going to get back the staff at some point. So at the very least, that means that the fight against Salem is going to go somewhat in their favor, right? They're going to get at least 1 relic back. Maybe this is after they've already defeated Salem and gotten all 4 relics. I doubt that's going to be the case, but something is going to have to happen, and this just raises so many more questions. Regardless, the portal opening up and RWBY returning to the Ever After, or hypothetically speaking, anyone that Somewhat would recognize, so any member of Team RWBY or Jean, because it could be Jean. He could have wanted to go see Juniper, someone that he does have a very deep connection with as well, because he spent so many years with Juniper, and so it could very well be Jean as well. But RWBY is the one who has the most connection to Somewhat, so I think that's probably the most likely. But this scene is almost certainly going to be shown in the show in and of itself. Returning to the Ever After is a very significant event to happen off-screen, unless this is the only time they're going to show it on screen, and then someone's just going to leave and then show up with Somewhat and Juniper and maybe other Afterans in Remnant at some point. We'll see how things fold out, but this is an event that is absolutely going to happen later in the show. In Volume 10, perhaps even beyond Volume 10. Maybe it'll happen in Volume 11 if we get that far. So this episode doesn't necessarily feel like Volume 9 Beyond, it feels like Volume 10 Beyond, almost. I'm very happy that we got to see the Ever After and see all of the characters that we had come to know throughout Volume 9, though we never got to check in on Jinxie, the little trash panda, and, well, all of the stuff he was picking up off the ground and pawning off onto other people. I would have liked to check in with him and see what was going on there, but alas, we didn't have enough time to check in with everyone. It was nice to see the genial gems, see what Herb's up to, realize that the bird is alive at the garden market, and of course check in with the Red Prince, see how much they have improved, and even an impact that Somewhat had left. The fact that the Red Prince kind of recognized Somewhat, or that Somewhat felt familiar, shows that even the smallest of encounters in the Ever After, with Little being such a tiny mouse, someone that I don't think the Red Prince even directly addressed in the episode, still left an impact on the Red Prince, and somewhat sowed the seeds of change in the Red Prince's demeanor as well. By the end of the episode, something wrong was righted, and Somewhat's purpose was fulfilled, and it seems that the Red Prince may be finding more of their own purpose, too. It was a nice little bow to put on the story of the Ever After, and obviously, with the way it ended off with that portal, the story of the Ever After is not yet done, and thanks to Team RWBY's interference, it is forever entwined in the war that is about to take place on Remnant. Likely, at least. Now I know Remnant and the Ever After were already directly entwined with one another, given that the gods came from the Ever After and went to Remnant and essentially created all life that was there. So yeah, the Ever After's kind of the source of life in the universe of Remnant as far as we know it. Anyways, I'm just rambling at this point. Let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are on this episode. How did you like seeing Somewhat and Juniper again? Getting to journey, however briefly, through the Ever After. What do you think of the Red Prince's development? And what are your theories surrounding the portal that appears at the end? Who is it that you think Somewhat recognizes stepping through that portal? I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say down in the comments below. If you like this video and want to see more like it, make sure to subscribe and join the Guild of the Eternal Flame. I stream also, so if you want to talk to me live, make sure to check out my Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. In fact, I'll be going live later tonight after this video is posted, so I hope to see some of you there. In the meantime though, I'll see you guys in the next video.